Hi, it's Gary. Welcome to today's video. Today, it's Fountain Pen Focus Day. The pen we're going to focus on is this. This is the TWSBI Eco. This particular version is in the green. I've got a number of different Ecos. It's a nice workhorse pen. They're fairly reasonably priced and they write really well. So join me down on the mat. Let's take a look at the pen, do some size comparisons, some weights and some measures, a writing sample, then I'll give you my thoughts and my scores for this pen and ink combination. Welcome down to the mat. So here we've got it, the TWSBI Eco. This was, I'm going to say, the third fountain pen that I bought when I got back into fountain pen collecting. That was a couple of years ago now, but it's still a pen that I quite often have inked up. When I bought it, it did come with a fine nib, and what I've found is as time has gone on, I don't enjoy fine nibs as much. I mean, they're all right, they've got the things that they're useful for, but for most of my writing, I prefer broader nibs. So I did buy this Eco. This has in the goldy colour, and this had a 1.1 stub nib in it. And what I did is I actually thought, well, I prefer using the green colour because I like green. So I pulled the nib and feed out of here and I put it into the green one. So now this orangey colour one, that's the one which has got the fine nib, and I've got the 1.1 in this Eco. So let's take a look through the body. So at the top, it's flat. In the middle, we've got in red plastic, we've got the TWSBI logo. Then we've got the green plastic. We've got a very small drop, and then we come to the top here of the clip. The clip is very stiff. It's not something I can even shift. It does fit nicely though over shirt pockets and over the flaps inside my pen case. We've got this, I'm not sure if it's a hexagonal shape, but we can see that going all the way around there on the cap. Same width all the way down at the bottom. Then we've got TWSBI. And we've got Eco and Taiwan there at the bottom of the cap. We then have a very noticeable drop off to the body. The body, to be honest, it's a tube. Same width all the way down. Plain bog standard tube type shape. Nothing really of interest to it. Inside here we can see we've got the ink, and then we've got the piston mechanism. There's a lot of ink in this at the moment. What I actually did is I didn't use the piston to fill it with this. The ink I'm using, there wasn't a lot left in the bottle, so I pulled out the nib and feed and I actually syringe filled it. So we see here the mechanism. This is one of the things I don't like about the TWSBI Eco. This mechanism takes up half of the body. At the top, we've got an O-ring. Then we've got, again, same colour as the cap. We've got this nice green plastic, and this is the piston mechanism. Obviously not going to work that now because I'd end up with a right inky mess on my hand. Let's take the cap off. So it takes, there's about 1¼ turns. Really quick and easy to take off. That reveals the business end. So here we are, we've got the TWSBI nib, number 5 size nib, fairly small, all one colour. Again, it's a personal preference. I like nibs which have got 2 colours on it. It just fetches out a bit more interest to me. If I turn it over there, we've just got a standard plastic feed. The section is very thin. It's not a pen that I can use for hours on end. I can maybe get a page, sometimes 2 pages, but then I find because it's so thin here in the section, it does actually start to make my hand cramp up a little bit. The section does taper out till we get to the threads. Again, the way I hold it, the threads, no problem for me. I'm not catching there with my ends of my fingers. The pen, unposted, is actually quite usable, and I tend to use this pen unposted. It will post, but it only posts just onto the end of the tube here. So you're not going to catch that piston knob, but it does make it very long. Let's pop the lid back on. But all in all, it's a pen I like. It's another one of those pens. I've always got this one or one of its siblings constantly inked up. Let's swap the view and do some size comparisons. The pens I brought in: the Pilot Metropolitan and the Lamy Safari. These are the two pens that I use for my standard measurements because most people, they've either got or seen one of these. All three of these pens, I've got to be honest, they're very good starter pens. This was the first pen I bought. This was the third. It took me a while to get the Lamy Safari, but that's because, I don't know, there's just something about the shape of it just doesn't appeal to me. Let's take off the caps. With the cap off, the Eco is slightly longer than both the Metropolitan and the Safari. I find that extra little bit of length, that's enough that I can use it nice and comfortably unposted. The nibs, to me, they're all very much of a similar size. The sections, the Metropolitan and the Eco, both feel about the same. They're both very thin, and it's hard really to compare against the Safari with that triangular section that it has. Let's post these. Posted, again, I've tried to line up the tops. The Eco, just a slight bit longer than the Safari and noticeably longer than the Metropolitan. Let's swap over and fetch some pens that are in roughly the same price range. The pens that I brought in a Hong Dian 1841. That cost 40 Australian dollars. We've got the TWSBI Eco 44 Australian dollars. And then I've got the Hong Dian N7 45 Australian dollars. The two Hong Dian pens made in China. The Eco made in Taiwan, which is a bit of a grey area whether you would class that as China or not. The nibs on the Hong Dians, they're both number 6 nibs, which means there's a lot of flexibility. They're easy to change. You can swap nibs. Whereas with the Eco, a little bit more difficult, but swapping nibs within the Eco models, I found that's nice and easy to do. Filling mechanisms. The Hong Dian N7 and the TWSBI Eco, they're both piston fillers. The Hong Dian 1841, that one's a cartridge converter. So slight differences there in the filling mechanism. Let's look at these unposted. Unposted, again, trying to line up the top of the nibs here. The Eco, definitely longer than both the other pens. Seeing it like this though, with the Hong Dian N7, that's such a pretty pen. And it's only $1 more than the Eco. The Eco to me, as I've already said, it's a workhorse pen, but it's not a pretty pen. You know, it's a pen that does what it says on the box. It writes, and it writes well. Let's pop the caps back on. With the caps on, the N7 ever so slightly smaller than the other two, which have more or less the same size. Again, you can see the difference in looks. Both the Hong Dians, to me, look really nice, whereas the Eco, you know, it's just plain. Let's switch this out and we'll fetch in the rule of measuring. Here we've got the rule of measuring. Let's fetch in the pen. So the full pen is 13.8 centimetres. Unposted, that comes in at 13 centimetres. Posted, and let's sit still, there we go, 16.9 centimetres. The width of the barrel is 1.21 centimetres. The width on the cap, that's 1.39 centimetres. And the section, the narrowest point down here near the bottom, is 0.82 centimetres. And it goes up to 0.94 centimetres. This is what I'm saying, it's a very thin section. Let's swap over and fetch in the scales of weighing. Here we've got the scales of weighing. Full pen, 22 grams. Cap alone, 9 grams. And the body, 13 grams. Remember, we've got a good full of ink in this pen at the moment. Let's get the scales out of the way and fetch in the notepad of testing. Here we've got the notepad of testing. This is an A4 Ayush notebook. It's made in India, 100 GSM paper, Got a slightly cream tone to it, and I find it's a really nice fountain pen friendly paper. Let's do the writing. So we've got here a TWSBI Eco, and it's got a 1.1 stub. It costs 44 Australian dollars, or it did when I bought it. The ink is by Diamine, and it's Black Ivy. This ink was part of the 2021 ink event calendar. It's a very dark green and it's got a red sheen to it, which I'm not sure if it's coming over on the camera at the moment. We'll see what it looks like once it's dried. Drying times. So we go immediate. 10 seconds. If you're wondering, I've got my pen rest in here because I'm trying to make sure that the camera's focusing. It seems to be struggling with focusing today. 30 seconds. 1 minute. Still fairly wet at the minute mark. 2 minutes. 2 minutes. Still smudging, but only a little tiny bit now. Going to move the mic down to the paper and write a sentence. Let's look at line variation. So, no pressure going down, with pressure going down. Then we're going across with no pressure, and I'm going to add some pressure and go across. So we can see here the natural line variation we're getting. I love the way when we're going down, we get that wider line, and you can see that in the writing. There's my S's. That looks so nice. And there's next to no pressure to write this. So we've got the nice thin lines going up and this glorious wide line coming down. Flow test. You know, that writes so nice. We just pop the pen down on the paper. I can get rid of that bar because it can now focus on the pen. So what are my thoughts on this pen? Let's start with looks. Well, look at it. It doesn't look very exciting, does it? It's a tube with a piston in it. Yes, it's got that demonstrator. I like to see the ink there moving around. Can't see it moving around too much because it's completely full at the moment. I like the green colour. I like the colours I've got on the others. I've got that orange one that I brought in. I've also got a black one. It's not a pen though that excites me. I think with the three that I've got, I don't really want any more Ecos, which is a shame because it is a nice pen. But pen looks, I'm only going to give this an 8 out of 10. Writing experience. When I got it, it had that fine nib on. Really didn't like it. I'm not going to say it was a bad nib. It wasn't. It's a nice nib. But I was finding that I tend to like broader nibs. When we look at the writing here, you can see the sheen coming through now. Certainly if you look at that TWSBI Eco there and the Diamine Black Ivy. Just going to fetch in this. This is Tomoe River 52 GSM. It's a Galen leather notebook. So this is TWSBI Eco 1.1 with Diamine Black Ivy. In here, you can really see that sheen coming through. You've got the glorious green colour. But then you got that hit of red as well. I think it looks really nice. No issues with the flow. It writes really nicely. So in terms of writing experience, you know, we've got this nice sheen. Yes, I know that's related to the ink, but we've got this glorious line variation. I'm going to give this a 9 out of 10. Ink flow, well, as you can see, it's a fairly wet combo. No flow issues, no issues with hard starts or skipping. One thing I would say a little bit, when I'm writing, sometimes it feels like it's catching on the paper, but that's the nature of the stub nib. But ink flow, yep, 9 out of 10. Value for money, 44 Aussie dollars. It's a workhorse pen. It's really reliable. I pick it up, it writes. I leave it months between uses. Pick it up, it writes. Never had a single issue with writing. With this nib, when it was in the orange one, I did have some flow issues, but that's because I was using a shimmer ink in the orange Eco. So all I did when I swapped the nibs is I put the feed and the nib through an ultrasonic cleaner. It seems to have solved the issue. Had zero issues with flow using this ink or any other non-shimmer ink. Not overly enamoured by the looks. As I say, it looks what it is. I think this is a pen, if somebody was to say to me, Gary, what pen would you recommend for someone new? This is the pen I'd suggest, the TWSBI Eco. Yes, bit on the high side. You can get the Metropolitan and the Safari for cheaper. But I think in terms of the whole package, this is by far the better value. So value for money for this, I'm going to give it a 9 out of 10. That means the total score for the TWSBI Eco with that 1.1 stub nib and Diamine Black Ivy is 8.75 out of 10. I hope you've enjoyed today's video. Have you got some TWSBI Ecos? What are your thoughts on them? Are they pens that you reach for? Are they your workhorse pens? Or are they there that you just use them every so often? Please drop a comment down below. Let's kickstart the conversation. Please hit the thumbs up button. Every time you like, every time you comment, just helps with the YouTube algorithm. If you haven't already, please subscribe to my channel so that you can get new videos as I release them. I'll talk to you again soon.